Hokie Hangover. We are live Wednesday night, 10 after 10 Eastern time. Time to talk about Marshall. Ricky, first of all, how are you?
Doing all right. Today was leg day, so I'm walking around like a 72-year-old man. But other than that, pretty good day.
Very nice. Andrew is not with us yet. He's expected to join us. He's running a company fantasy draft, and he's the commissioner. So he gave us a heads up ahead of time that he may need until 10 o'clock, and then he sent us a text saying, hey, get rolling without me. It's still going on. So we're expecting him to join us. So hopefully he's able to jump on board. We are live on youtube.com/at Hokie Hangover Podcast. All of our handles on X are at the top right-hand corner of the screen, as you can see. We're on audio everywhere. Shout out to all our sponsors. We are going to start tonight with a little bit of unfortunate news, but I wanted to make sure that we covered this off the top. So, little non football. I don't really know how to really address this, Ricky. This is kind of tough because as a parent, you never want to have to go through something like this, right? It's no surprise. It's no surprise to any of the listeners. I am a dad. I have a 2-year-old son of my own. So when I see the news of a family going through something serious, I want to make sure I can help and support any way that I can. And I put out a tweet from my account because I came across a GoFundMe page earlier this week for Virginia Tech Vice President of Player Personnel, Mike Villagrana. His daughter, Camryn, she's 6 years old. Camryn's sick. She has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Very serious. 6 years old. As a parent, you never want to see a kid go through this. I think whether you're a parent or not listening to this podcast, I think you can empathize with what this family is going through. A lot of stuff going on the field for Virginia Tech that we talked about last weekend. Very frustrating loss. But then you hear about news like this, and you want to do anything you can to help. This GoFundMe was started by a friend of the family, and I tweeted it from our official podcast account. I retweeted. I retweeted the link. I'll make sure to send it out again and put the link in the show notes as well. If you're able to financially help the Villagranas, you feel compelled to do so, go check out the GoFundMe link. It's basically going toward all the medical expenses of Camryn. If you're the praying type, definitely say a prayer for the Villagrana family and for Camryn that she's able to get through this. If you're not the praying type, just send good thoughts and vibes to the family. Obviously, I don't know what else to say, Ricky, but I just felt like we needed to address this. I wanted to get the message out. I if it was my kid going through this, I would want all the help I could get, even if it wasn't financial. Just people supporting me. And as a parent, you never want to see a kid go through this. No children should have to go through this. No family should have to go through this. I don't really know what else to say other than we'll send out the GoFundMe link again, and if you can support the Villagranas, definitely go ahead and do so.
Absolutely. Looking at the page now, they've raised over $36,000, which is a tremendous amount. And everyone who's already put forth, I'm sure the family is very grateful. I think all of us that are associated with Virginia Tech are very grateful as well. It's certainly a worthy cause, and my prayers go out to the Villagranas. This is it's a hard story, like you mentioned, Mike. And I'm not a father. I hope to be one someday, but that's it's a really, really hard thing to see, and just have to hope that the family can navigate this as best they can.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll send out the GoFundMe, and if you can support it, definitely do so. and it's never easy to transition out of something like that. So thank God Andrew came in, and he's here now. And I'm going to adjust the layout here of the YouTube. Andrew, what's going on?
Not much, man. To all your guys' point, on the more serious note, this is definitely a cause worth supporting. We talk a lot one way or the other about this program. We praise, we criticize, but these are real people. And, it's something you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy. So when it was someone who's in your camp, I see no better excuse if you are financially able to throw a couple of dollars out there and, help this family through something that's going to be really, really tough. But we'll try the transition from there. Otherwise, guys, I'm doing good. Sorry, I'm late. The job of work fantasy football commissioner when the company is based in San Diego, California, is we work after hours, big time. But I hope you guys are doing well.
I can see how that would be tough. I did let everybody know where you were and that you would be joining us, and you gave us a warning about this. Well, yesterday when we were trying to figure out when we were going to record, you said might need till 10 o'clock, and then we were texting back and forth to make sure we were tracking, and you mentioned that the draft was still happening, still going on, and I didn't realize the San Diego, California part. So that makes it difficult.
Luckily, when you have commissioner powers, you can be like, I am turning this clock down to 30 seconds. There's nothing you can do about it. So
hurry up. Make your pick. Make your pick. Okay, it's Marshall week. Let's put Vanderbilt behind us, right? We'll use it to inform our understanding of what this team is going into Marshall, right? But let's put the Marshall game behind us. Let's talk about the depth chart because Virginia Tech released an updated depth chart. I have some thoughts. I want to make.
Are you sure that it wasn't me, Mike? Are you sure?
I saw Andrew, your friend and friend of the podcast, Don Tomas, try to grill Ricky in our Twitter mentions, only to realize that I was the one who was going to have questions about the linebacking core. So. Yeah. Beautifully done.
To our friend Don, you just gotta read the entire sentence, man. We can't be assumptive like that. Though in many situations you would be right, Don. It is Mike who apparently has something to say. So you can start it off, dude. Say what you got to say.
Okay. Well, let me quick backdrop, right? Quick backdrop. So Virginia Tech released a new depth chart. And it had some updates to linebacker position. So if you guys will remember, the linebacking core, at least the starters for the opener, Sam Brumfield, of course, the transfer was at Mike because that's what literally we brought him in and paid him to do. We paid him to come play Mike linebacker at Virginia Tech. We had Jaden Keller starting at will. We had Keontae Jenkins at star. That was the layout. Right, that was the layout. You guys will remember Jaden Keller for a large part of last year was the Mike. So we moved him to Will in the offseason and wanted to keep him on the field. Spectacular, right? It took legitimately one half of football to then throw Kelly Lawson back into the fold at will, move him off of the number 2 line on the depth chart and move him into the starting lineup. And now all of a sudden, going into the Marshall game, Kelly Lawson is now the starter at will. Fine. Jaden Keller is back at Mike linebacker as a backup to Sam Brumfield. And we still have Keontae Jenkins at star. Guys, I have a question. Does anybody on the Virginia Tech coaching staff have any idea what we're doing at linebacker outside of Sam Brumfield? I think the answer is probably no. So that's my gripe, okay? That's my gripe. We went into the season hoping they would have figured out linebacker. We complained about it on the recap to Vanderbilt. And I don't feel like we're any closer to the answer now going into the Marshall game. And Pry and his staff are talking about, in the press conference this week, how they feel good about some guys and they feel like the film in the first game, gave them some confidence to make some changes in the linebacking core. I just don't want to play musical chairs at linebacker again. We did this last year, and it was a disaster. It was an abject disaster. I don't want to do that again.
Well, Mike, I'll tell you. And as Virginia Tech fans, we've probably been more used to the old, more common saying, if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. Well, nowadays, it's like if you have 8 outside linebackers, you don't have the 2 you need. And I can see how, as coaches, it's probably tempting to want to put the guy who you feel maybe got narrowly beat out at Mike, at Will, and feel like that's a good fit. But ultimately, I guess the proof is in the pudding. It didn't take that much proof. It must have been a really close call at the time of the initial decision. So what does this solidify for us? Nothing, and that's the problem, right? It's still a huge question mark. And that's where, heading into week 2, as we all know, at 0-1 against Marshall, with 2 hopefully very winnable games to figure this stuff out, that's where we have a big question mark. And I'm sure we'll get to it. There's another one behind that position as well.
This goes back to a broader issue with this program, and it's been their inability to develop linebackers in general. This was a Fuente problem. This has been a Pry problem. It's not unique to this coaching staff, but Virginia Tech hasn't had, in my opinion, a highly competent linebacker since Rayshard Ashby in 2019. And he lasted for about 1 season before he really fell off. This has been a huge issue for this program for years. And, it's really, really hard to play good defense when you don't have confidence in your linebackers, especially the man in the middle. And I'm not really sure how Tech's feeling about Sam Brumfield's performance against Vanderbilt. It certainly seems like they weren't pleased with the guy next to him, which is why he's not playing anymore. But they've got to figure this stuff out. And Chris Marv, Sean Quinn, these are the guys, right? This is your group. You've got 2 guys coaching 3 spots. And we're not getting the development and the consistency out of any of those 3 positions that I think is to be expected. And it's really hurting the entire unit.
I'm just going to put this bluntly. I think this is pretty damning against the defensive coordinator, Chris Marv, who happens to also coach linebackers.
Yeah.
And we're not a hot take podcast. I think it's probably a little too early to call for anybody's head. I think we collectively, coming out September last year, we all had some questions about not only Chris Marv, but also Tyler Bowen and, the coordinators, right? Because Pry hired 2 first-time coordinators to his coaching staff. I think it was natural to kind of point fingers and ask those questions. I think both guys got the most out of their units, really, for the rest of the season. I thought Tech improved on both sides of the ball last year, right? And I don't want to overreact to the opener, but the linebacker thing is like an ongoing problem. And I think if the defense continues to struggle, we could be in a position later in the year where we're asking questions about whether or not there's going to be a change defensive coordinator. So that's not something that will happen in season. It would have to be like legitimately catastrophic. Like Virginia Tech, I feel like would have to start like 1-5 or 1-6 or something like that, which I just flat out not going to happen. That would be it's not going to happen.
If Alex Grinch can keep his job in the middle of the year for like 3 consecutive seasons for the kind of performances he put on as defensive coordinator,
right?
I think it's pretty fair to say that there is going to be no change in the middle of the year. But you're right, Mike. There has to be some emphasis in the meeting room, in the team meetings, on, and whenever the coaches are getting together on figuring this stuff out. And we can assess the progress on this front, towards the end of the year. And I'm sure we'll probably talk about it throughout the season. But when it comes to making a decision, I feel like we're going to have to really see some improved play out of all three of those guys for us to have a conversation at the end that is a productive one.
I don't mean to cut your heads off. We'll have to adjust this. But this is not Andrew Alex, but Andrew, a commenter. And Marv is the linebacking coach. Heard rumors he wasn't a good linebacker recruiter or coach at Florida State. Starting to seem like that's true. Linebackers under Pry were much better when he was hands-on with the defense. I think that it's possible, and Andrew, I'll cede the floor to you here in a second. I think it's certainly possible that the defense could improve if Pry is more hands-on, but all that is really conjecture, guys, right?
But also, is that something you want from a head coach that has his own problems and his own faults that he needs to work on?
Right. And I think Pry came out of year one saying that he wanted to be more hands-off because he wasn't doing as well with the game management stuff when he was more hands-on, right? He said that was an issue that he had his first year. So if Pry has to be more hands-on, I think it's not a good thing on a number of levels for Virginia Tech. You got to let your coordinators coordinate, and if they're not the guys, you got to figure something else out.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, like Pry being hands-on, if we get to that point this season, that spells catastrophe, right?
Yeah.
That means things are going so horribly wrong that he needs to openly, essentially take an indictment against himself as a program CEO, a hiring manager. What you're supposed to do when hiring these coordinators is hire someone that you trust to the point where that responsibility no longer lies on your shoulders.
Right.
And to be fair, I do think it's premature for us to be talking anything about jobs.
Agreed.
What I don't think is premature is the facing of reality. And that reality is that since the departure of Bud Foster, because let's be honest, it was never a problem under him, you see weak points in the defense, problems that can't seem to be solved. And of course, we can't rule out the possibility that any of these guys rise to the occasion. But we had 10 months of expecting them to rise to the occasion. And in week one, we're still throwing up our hands in the air and asking what's happening and making changes and what have you. So when, like you guys pointed out, and like Andrew, our commenter, pointed out, you have a litany of homegrown linebackers, none of which who are like true freshmen being forced into this thing. And you come out of camp so unsure that you make a change. Yeah, that's a bit of an indictment. I mean, imagine if you did that. And you're not going to do that at quarterback, but imagine if you did that at quarterback, right? You made your decision, and then one game was bad enough that you immediately had to flip it.
Apparently 1/2.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like more an indictment on your judgment, whether that's right or not. We're talking about optics. So that's what I see. Again, too early to be talking about people's jobs, but you have to make the judgments that are in front of you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's all I mean by it being indictment of Chris Marv, right? I'm not calling for, to be clear, I'm not calling for Chris Marv to be fired. I just want to put that.
And you were clear initially.
Yeah, I just, right. No, but people will take that sound bite and run with it. I'm not, I can see the tweets now. I am not calling for anybody's head. Way too early. Tech played too well in the second half on Saturday. Tech turned it around defensively, short of 2 possessions in the second half. I'm not calling for anybody's head. With that said, linebacker's been a problem. It continues to be a problem. Marv is the linebackers coach. And back to the hands-on point, this goes for Chris Marv and Tyler Bowen. We're paying these guys way too much money to not coach. Like you're not going to pay them. You're not going to pay them their salaries for then Brent Pry to be more hands-on and to wear multiple hats. You only do that if it's a catastrophe. I mean, think about Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. We just talked about this on the recap. It took him 3 full really bad seasons to then be like, you know what? I'm calling the defense. Pry does not want to do that. Pry wants to bring Marv along, and he has brought Marv along, right? Pry was the primary play caller defensively for much of the first year, turned it over to Marv late in the season. Marv was the primary play caller all of last year, right? And, there were reports that Pry was more involved with the defense, when the team was struggling in September last year. But that doesn't mean that he was hands-on the rest of the season, because I don't think he was. I think he got into that room. I think he, talked about and implemented some things that, and maybe it was just messaging, right, that wasn't coming through from Marv. And then he stepped back into his head coaching position. I don't think this is a situation where Pry was like calling the defense last year for the second half of the year when Tech's defense was playing better. It's just I don't think that's the case.
Yeah,
there's nothing to indicate that there was nothing out there to indicate that was the case.
It would be
other
extremely
than Pry
obvious if that was the case. You'd be able to tell.
Right, and outside of a few reports saying Pry was taking more of an active role in the defense, there wasn't anything to indicate that Pry was calling the plays, and it didn't look like he was doing that on the sideline. He didn't say he was doing that. So, anyway, back to the original point, they got to figure out linebacker, right? And I think for Virginia Tech to both bounce back not only this week, but moving forward throughout the rest of the schedule and be the team that we all thought it could be on paper, I think the linebacking core has to be a lot better than it was on Saturday. And the first part of that is figuring out what the personnel situation is. So, that's where we're at there. Jalen Stroman is going to be out. It brings me no pleasure. Surprise, he's going to be out.
Yeah.
We knew that this time would come, unfortunately. We mentioned it on the preseason pod, right? Whether it was an injury or targeting or whatever, we knew Stroman has a track record, unfortunately, of missing time. He's going to be out for at least a few games, Brent Pry said. A few weeks, I think he said in the press conference. So Jalen Jones is going to step in and start alongside Mose Phillips, right? And that was a combination we saw a lot last year. We saw that combination a lot. So they have played together in the back end of the secondary. I thought Jalen Jones was okay when he was in and played on Saturday. Here we are. I mean, any thoughts on that?
it's not great, especially since there's now questions about Mansour Delane and whether or not he can hold down his part of the field. I'm not, a lot of people are already asking, why wouldn't you move Delane to safety? And I guess my point to that would be, you've been recruiting and developing at the safety position for quite a while now, and you've been talking about your confidence in Mose, and now he's grown, and the increased experience of Jalen Jones at safety, having switched from receiver. A lot of praise for Quentin Reddish in this summer. So I think you got to give those guys a chance and let Mansour figure his stuff out at corner before you start trying to move folks around. So it's not great, but Mike, like you said, this unit's got some legitimate playing experience from last year, given Jalen Stroman's previous issues with availability.
Yeah, I mean, the best kind of ability is availability. And unfortunately, that's been an issue for the younger Stroman. But it's not a movie we haven't seen before. That's the good news, right? It's not something that comes out of left field. Jalen Jones played, comparatively speaking, to last year, one of the better games of his career against Vanderbilt. And you hope that is a trend, that he improved and Stroman just still beat him out, right? As for the younger guys, as to serious Quentin Reddish time, I am very high on Quentin Reddish. I hope it doesn't come to that extreme of a point. Now I'm kind of resting on the fact that it might be something that we're going to have to experience this season. It's tough to see one of the few positions we named heading into the season, along with linebacker and the offensive line, as a weak point. And I think certainly among those three positions, the one that you felt like there was the least depth, go down that quickly. But, I mean, that's football, man. That's why Clemson is not the team you want to play in November. Because they're deep. They don't take transfers, but they got a heck of a lot of recruits.
Yeah, a lot of good players.
People who were seriously big time at one point. But you play the hand that you're dealt, and I think with a spread offense, like we're going to see with Marshall, will be some good film to get on Jalen Jones, who again, former wide receiver. I feel like I've always held him to a little bit of a lower standard because of that, but now it's showtime, right? You're a couple years into it. You're thrust into a starting role. Let's see what the kid can do, and come at least post Rutgers ahead of Cam Ward, we'll be able to have a sober conversation about, what the man in that position really means to our overall chances going into ACC play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think Saturday will provide an idea of what that's going to look like. We'll see how they play. I mean, we knew this day might come. Brent Pry said that Mansour Delane would be practicing a little bit at safety. I think that's kind of like an emergency valve, right? It's like,
Yeah.
A
It sounds like
glass.
if they have another guy go down, you're gonna have Delane playing safety. So
Yeah, that's a break glass in case of emergency situation.
I don't think they want to put the guy who, regardless of how he played this past Saturday, is like a projected corner NFL draft pick at safety unless you absolutely have to.
Right.
Because in this current day and age of college football, where players are free agents at the end of every year, and you have a guy with NFL draft stock, allegedly, and more than allegedly. There's people at camp watching him. He had a bad game. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. But to be switching guys around like that is probably bad news for your overall reputation surrounding these players. So I don't think they'll do that unless it's a last case scenario.
Agree. Yeah, agree. No Nick Gallo. Also, I mean, on the offensive side, everything's pretty much status quo. But no Nick Gallo, so he's going to be out again. That's okay. Benji Gosnell played really well on Saturday. I don't think we probably talked about that as much as we should have on the recap. But the Gosnell brothers, both of them were very good. Benji Gosnell in particular, we were all really excited about him in the preseason, and he showed out in the opener. So a good sign there. Virginia Tech's playing Marshall on Saturday. This is a game that obviously Virginia Tech needs to win. Marshall is, at least on paper, entering the year, one of the top contenders in the Sun Belt. With that said, they are a team that Virginia Tech, if they're playing at peak efficiency, should beat. Virginia Tech is a 3-touchdown favorite on Saturday, which I think tells you everything you need to know there. Marshall doesn't know who their starting quarterback is. They rotated 3 in the opener. The 2 primary quarterbacks are Braylon Braxton and Stone Earl. 2 of them played pretty extensively. Also on the roster is Cole Pennington. Yes, he is Chad Pennington's son. Yes, that Chad Pennington that played at Marshall and for the Jets. Yeah. He's probably the one that's least likely to win the starting quarterback job. It's between Braxton and Early. Mitch Griffiths, who transferred from Wake Forest, was injured in camp, so he's not playing, not factoring into the quarterback situation. So it's between Braxton and Early. Early had 8 carries for 55 yards on Saturday against Stony Brook in their 45-3 win. So he's a guy who's a little bit more mobile, so keep an eye on that. Marshall has two good running backs, Jordan Houston, AJ Turner. AJ Turner had 8 for 119 and a touchdown against Stony Brook. So no, we're not dealing with Rasheen Ali this year again, but Marshall's got a couple at least competent running backs. They return a bunch of production on the O-line in regards to starters, but there are a couple of transfers in the mix there as well. So this isn't a unit that has a lot of continuity. I think there's like 2 or 3 returning starters from last year's team, but then guys who have started other places. Defense only returning 5 starters. Didn't really get as great of a look as we wanted to, obviously, with the defense against Stony Brook. But I figured I should give the lay of the land on Marshall because outside Diego Pavia, we didn't really give Vanderbilt their fair shake, and that's something I regret on the preview. Wanted to make sure I gave Marshall their fair shake, but this is a team that Virginia Tech should demolish on Saturday. They should win this game by multiple scores. That they're Virginia Tech's much better in the trenches. They're much better at the skill positions. They're much better defensively on paper. This is a game where Virginia Tech should roll. It's why they're a 3-touchdown favorite. But I wanted to make sure I gave Marshall their fair shake. Virginia Tech needs to take this game seriously because they were totally unserious in the Vanderbilt game for the first 2.5 quarters. Just totally unserious. They need to take this game seriously on Saturday at Lane Stadium.
Yeah, and I think the part about this game that worries me is just that Marshall is such an unknown in a lot of ways. We don't really know what to expect from them offensively, given that their first game was against a team that lost 10 games last year at the FCS level. You don't know who the quarterback is. They had a rotation at running back going, so you're not really sure what you're going to see there. Defensively, lots of new faces, not a lot of continuity from last year's defense. And you've got a coach in Charles Huff that is facing some legitimate expectations this year. And just based on the stuff that I've read and seen, it looks like the fans are maybe not restless, maybe a bit of a stretch, but I think that there's definitely some heightened pressure on Huff to get it done. So you've got a coach that's, not necessarily back against the wall, but, maybe trending in that direction. And you've got a bunch of unknowns on this team. But Mike, you bring up a good point. There's a reason why Vegas started this as a 2-touchdown game, and it has quickly moved to a 3-touchdown favorite for the Hokies. And that's just that Marshall's roster on paper doesn't look particularly good. And I think a lot of folks are probably correctly thinking the Hokies will rebound in a big way after getting woken up by I still can't believe that happened last week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I don't have a ton on Marshall. I tried to look into these guys. The Stony Brook game, as far as I'm concerned, is a bit of a wash just because there's
FCS
not going to be and not just that they're an FCS school, that from what I can tell, they're one of the worst FCS programs in the country. So you're not going to be able to get a lot out of that game. Not knowing who the starting quarterback is, not knowing how to prepare that way, not really having a great idea as to what you may or may not see from a schematic standpoint, given all of the new guys on defense. I think there's a possibility here that Virginia Tech starts off slow once again, given that they've had that problem in the past now for well over a season. And Virginia Tech, I think there's going to be some questions that they have coming into this game that they can't answer based on the film that they've watched.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and I'll echo a lot of what you said there, Rick. Number one, in terms of offense for Marshall, they do have some talented receivers. I think that's been a bit of a theme for them maybe over the course of the last few years. New offensive coordinator and a new offensive scheme that comes with it. They're running more of a spread. Seth Dogie, I don't even know how to pronounce it. You might remember his brother, Garrett, from a couple of years ago, starting quarterback of West Virginia. Yeah, this is a guy who played at Texas Tech under Kingsbury. Spread offense guy. Good in theory when you don't know who QB1 is, when it's not even really narrowed down to 3 by week 1, and when you're playing a Virginia Tech team, real week 1, right? Stony Brook went 0-10 last year in the FCS.
Yeah.
And they're flipping the program. So it's week 1. It doesn't spell well for them against Dorian Strong and Mansour Delane, who I still believe should be very good. Maybe a good tune-up game for the safeties. Advantage in Virginia Tech's favor defensively, like you said, a lot of transfers. If they were, again, like SEC Power 5 guys, you look at the names, Kentucky, Ohio State, Colorado, what have you. If they were that good, they'd probably still be playing in the Power 5. Does that mean that Marshall is a team that we can look over? No, evidently we can't look over anyone these days, right? Virginia Tech just lost as a 14-point favorite to a team on a 10-game losing streak. Now we're getting clowned on the internet for it. This podcast, of all places, for complaining.
Appreciate the juice, yeah. Yeah, this pod got juiced, baby.
But at the end of the day, right, you have to assume, for your own mental health sake, that we have a leg up in the receiver corner matchup and vice versa. That we have a leg up in the trenches, God willing.
Oh, Jesus.
And that this is a game that Virginia Tech should be able to win on talent alone. Factor in the chip on their shoulder that these guys should have, and what should be an electric, sold-out home Layton Stadium crowd that I will, in fact, despite my better angels, be a part of. You know, I don't know if it's a 21-point spread, and we'll get to our predictions. But, you know, Tech should still roll. And if there's a Marshall podcast out here waiting for this moment, if you can use this, God bless me.
Juice those numbers. That would be something. Anyway. Anything else? I mean, this is... You got to start fast here. I think there's potential.
This game is much more about us than it is Marshall.
Yeah,
I think Marshall, in a lot of ways, is still trying to figure out who they are, and even in terms of their ceiling. I think we all can appreciate the fact that Virginia Tech, when operating at the level that we think that they can, are a top 6 team in the ACC, which has got approximately 82 teams this year. So this team certainly has potential, and we saw what that can look like in the third quarter when Virginia Tech started to turn it around and then took the lead late in the fourth or early in the fourth. And it's all about trying to piece that together. So I think for me, I'm looking at how Virginia Tech starts this game. Do they put the onus on Marshall defensively to try and stop them downfield? We saw what Virginia Tech tried to do in the early going against Vanderbilt. Quick throws to the perimeter. It did not really generate much movement at all defensively, and Vanderbilt just kind of bottled it up. Is Virginia Tech able to get the ball downfield? Are they able to establish a running game in the early going? I think it's really important for Tech's first drive to at least get a few first downs. Even if you're not going to be able to score, you've got to move the ball a little bit to give yourself some confidence moving into the rest of the game. The last thing we need to see is another quarter where Marshall wins the time of possession like 10-5 or something like that. Virginia Tech runs 10 plays and never gets anything going offensively. That's the last thing we need to see in this game. When you have a team that's a 3-touchdown underdog, you cannot give them the belief that they can win the game. That's exactly what happened last week. Virginia Tech gave Vanderbilt quite the belief, giving them a 14-point lead at halftime. in this situation, especially at home, you've got to put your boot on their throat. So it's got to be a hot start.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll see if Virginia Tech's able to do that. I mean, I think the one thing that Brent Pry noted is that he wanted the downfield passing game to be more present early on, which I think is something the entire fan base was shouting for on social media, which either means Brent Pry is really online or everybody was just seeing the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
just something to note. Also saw some comments out there both on social media, and I got a few texts about this, about Brent Pry kind of giving it to Bowen in the media, like indirectly.
It certainly seemed like he was very open about his thoughts on what was a lackadaisical offense for at least the first half, and in a lot of ways in the midway, late in the fourth quarter.
And I have some working theories about that. I probably should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about the defensive play calling and Pry having his hand in it and all that stuff. My working theory is that maybe Pry himself, obviously as a defensive guy, has more of an awareness of the issues and the blind spots of the defense, and maybe feels like he has to be a little bit more vocal about what needs to happen on offense. But I came away with the same thought as everybody else. I'm like, you know what? The offense scored enough to win the game on Saturday, right? Even after a really slow start. Scored plenty of points. So I think, yeah, look in the mirror defensively. I mean,
are we sure about that? They scored 27, right?
Yeah, I would beg to differ. The offense threw
I feel like in this day and age, if you don't score 30 at least, that's not enough.
Against that Vanderbilt team, 27 should have been enough. Against that Vanderbilt team, should have been enough.
I mean, yeah, it was a very productive second half.
Yeah.
But
well, if that's the case,
Mike,
then
one of your
should
favorite
be giving it to Marv in the media, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
The media doesn't even know who Marv. The fans don't even know who Marv is. A lot of them.
Can't pick him out of a line. Can't pick him out.
Not the people that are listening to this podcast, because you guys. I mean, you
How
guys
come
clearly in
Bud's
the thick of it.
defense stunk last week? Sorry,
but no, I mean, Mike, one of your favorite terms is complementary football. The offense was not playing complementary football in a way that would help the defense. Going 3 and out and giving Vanderbilt the ball.
No, it was not.
midway through the field.
No, was certainly not. It was an all systems, as I mentioned on the recap. It was an all systems failure.
Yeah.
On Saturday for sure.
But
anyway, I mean, look, this is about. I mean, I think Ricky said best. This is about Tech on Saturday, right? Even more so than the Vanderbilt game, where I thought it was about Tech too. This is a way less talented team. Way less talented. Like, way worse. There's a difference between being a bottom feeder in the SEC and being like the second best team in the Sun Belt. I think that kind of goes without saying. So
there's a gap.
Well, based on the preseason prediction, by the way, the 5th best team in their division in the Sun Belt, based on their preseason media poll.
And this kind of speaks to the predictions being a bit all over the map, because you have the media voting one way, like the local media or the G5 media voting one way, and then you have the national media putting Marshall anywhere between like the second and like 4th best team in the Sun Belt. So there we are. Who knows? ACC picks. BYU, SMU. I have no idea how he did last week, by the way. Scott, get on that. I don't know.
Dude,
this is
spreadsheet guy.
Yeah, spreadsheet guy. He's my other podcast producer, not this one, but it's his responsibility for the picks as we dawned on him in a text message.
Didn't he volunteer for that?
He may have.
No, I volunteered him. But
yeah, he was voluntold.
Yeah, he was voluntold. So I don't know. I have no idea how he did. Friday, I know we got the Virginia Tech game wrong. Friday,
yes,
7 p.m.
Yes, we did.
Yes, ESPN2, one of two SEC games, one of two ACC games on Friday night. BYU SMU. I've always referred to SMU as an ACC school. SMU is an 11.5 point. Shout out Jimmy Cleveland. SMU
Still
is
not
an
used to it.
11.5 point favorite against BYU. Give me the BYU Cougars to cover here on the road. Give me BYU to cover.
I'm gonna go with the ponies at home. It's a lot of points. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know a ton about BYU this year, but I'll take SMU with those points.
That Nevada game still kind of spooks me, and
Yeah,
blowing the
fair.
brakes off Houston Christian doesn't get me there just yet. So I'll give BYU 11.5 points.
Okay.
If not,
Cool.
we'll have to go to the Big 12.
That's it. That's all it takes. That's how we realign conferences. Duke. That's all it takes.
It's better than the networks.
All it takes is covering the spread against BYU and a boatload of money. That's all it takes. Duke Northwestern. I was on a Northwestern podcast this week to help preview the Duke side of the matchup.
Please tell me how you described this Duke offense.
I think my exact words were, "It's something." That's what I said. It's something. One of the keys to the game I gave out was for Duke to find literally anybody outside of Jordan Moore to throw it to, because one game of Eli Pancol having like 65 yards receiving after having like his career year be 2 years ago when he had like 375 yards receiving. We need to see more out of that for me to believe he's like a number 2 option for Duke in the receiving game. But yeah, they need somebody. Anyway, that's enough talk about Duke Northwestern. Give me Northwestern at home.
Yeah, Duke's offense is, let's just say, differently abled, and we'll put it that way. I'll take Northwestern. That's not that many points for them to cover. So
Differently abled. We don't want to get canceled. Andrew.
You think Manny Diaz isn't going to take the opportunity on national television, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Fox Sports 1, to send the nation a message that it wasn't just Mike Ilko in Durham, North
man.
Carolina that could make some magic? Give me the Devils.
national message winning a game at the high school stadium onto the lake.
They're making they're making everything over there kind of nice. Just saying. They got a lot of money. They're in the Big Ten.
It's a beautiful Big Ten locale on the lake, that temporary stadium. Ripe for the under, 37.5, playing in a high school stadium.
Imagine playing in that
the
place
house on
in the last week in November.
Can't
Dear
wait to watch
God.
that. Can't wait to watch that random Big Ten game.
Road trip?
Oh, don't count us out for anything. Number 23, Georgia Tech. You heard that right. They're ranked now.
Yep.
They are traveling to Syracuse for a nooner. They are a 2.5 point road favorite. Guys, look, Syracuse could not stop Ohio from running the football down their throat. So what makes me think that they'll have Georgia Tech's number in the running game? Not much, but
Do it.
buddy, Syracuse.
Yep.
Home dog at the week. Sleepy noon start. This is the type of game where we get Haynes King throwing like 2 or 3 really boneheaded interceptions. I thought that might be last week against Georgia State, so Georgia State could cover a 3-touchdown spread. Didn't quite happen that way. The line is trying to tell us something. This should be Georgia Tech by like 4 or 5, and the fact that it's not tells you everything you need to know about this game. I got Syracuse out right here. I think Syracuse wins, knocking
Agreed.
Georgia Tech
I
back
think-
out of the top 25.
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech's going to fall back down to earth a little bit. Well, I think we're also learning that win over Florida State is meaning less and less every week. So give me the orange.
No, I thought I was really going to be going against the grain here.
Nope.
They put Kyle McCord in a dome. The national media underestimated that. And LaQuint Allen, native of Millville, New Jersey, good player last year, getting better now. But because you guys picked Syracuse, I'll pick Georgia Tech.
Oh,
jeez.
such a contrarian.
I need to get some points back. I feel like I went. If Scott,
We don't even know what the standings are. It's week 2.
You may not need to get any points back.
You may be winning.
God. Oh. Speaking of weird games, Pitt is playing Cincinnati at noon on ESPN2. Scott Satterfield is really doing his best to get himself fired. Pittsburgh looked pretty good, I will say. The defense looked a little interesting for a couple quarters, but the offense scoring like 50 points, that doesn't happen often. Yes, it was Kent State, but I mean, they wouldn't lay it on Kent State like that if they played them last year with that offense that they were rolling out on the field. I think they did play Kent State last year, so I got to look at that past result. But anyway, Pitt's offense looks fun. I'm actually going to take Pitt here on the road to get this done. Cincinnati's a 1.5 point favorite, short favorite at home. I like Pitt to go out there and win this game outright. I think they win. I like Pitt.
My disdain for Pat Narduzzi forces me to pick Cincinnati here.
Okay, fair. Andrew?
Same.
Okay. Louisville, Jacksonville State. Does Jacksonville State cover a 30-point spread?
No.
I don't think so either. Okay, moving on. Cal Auburn. One of the more interesting ACC games of the weekend. That's what I always say about the Cal Golden Bears. 3:30 Eastern, ESPN2. Auburn is a 13-point favorite. Auburn looked pretty good on Saturday, of course. I mean, all of us look good if we were playing Alabama A&M, except maybe Virginia Tech. Don't put it past them. Give me Cal here, plus a 13. I think they go on the road and cover the spread. I think Auburn wins, tight-ish game. Cal's kind of looking improved, so keep an eye on that. Jaden Ott got hurt last week. He's going to play. So
is Auburn in the Eastern Time Zone?
As somebody who traveled to the Florida Panhandle to go to the beach and is going to do so again in November, I can tell you that Auburn is not in the Eastern Time Zone. Opelika, Alabama is barely in the Central Time Zone. So
Love an ACC game with two teams not in the Eastern Time Zone. Auburn at home with the points.
Yeah,
Okay.
just as Mike likes the snow white beaches of Destin, Florida, I too like picking the Auburn Tigers in this game with the points.
that's one of those SAT analogies I still have failed to understand. Duquesne, Boston College, 3:30 ACC Extra, ESPN.
You got a
Plus.
line on this?
Absolutely not. I have to go searching, but you can get into the game for $5 if you want. So
Whatever the spread is, give me BC.
yeah,
I know that noted Thomas Castellanos hater Mike McDaniel might disagree, but the Eagles, Bill O'Brien, don't sleep on them.
Yeah, we're like one or two podcasts away from should Tech have taken Bill O'Brien, and who would you rather have, Castellanos or Drones? So until that conversation comes up, let's just move on.
maybe we should see if Bill O'Brien has any eligibility left so he can play right tackle.
God.
It's from the Belichick tree, man.
Yeah. Would it be cheaper to pay Parker Clements or Bill O'Brien to play right tackle? Charlotte on the road to North Carolina, 3:30 ACC Network. UNC is a 22.5 point favorite. Guys, I don't know if you caught. In fact, I can probably guess you caught none of the James Madison and Charlotte game last weekend. James Madison's rebuilding under Bob Chesney, and let me tell you,
saw some of it.
Let me tell you, guys, James Madison is supposed to be like maybe threatening to make a bowl game, like relatively mid in comparison to last season. Guys, Charlotte had some injuries in the preseason, like 4 or 5 starters on the depth chart not playing last week. They're hoping to get a few back against North Carolina, but Buddy Charlotte is a mass. Biff Poggi needs to figure that out.
Well, Mike, I don't know if you saw Biff Poggi's press conference. He was like, I may have gotten these guys a little too excited about week one, James Madison, and they may have all injured each other. So I'll wear that learning experience. We move on. And then after the game, a reporter was like, how are you saying that this is an improvement from last year? And Poggi was like, if you don't think that was an improvement over the team we had last year, like, you're kidding yourself. You don't know football. They lost 30-7.
Yeah.
But either way, I'll take Charlotte.
Oh, God.
Got to root for the hometown team.
That's a disgusting pick.
That's sick. As bad as Carolina may be this year, they're going to have too much talent. That's not enough points to give me pause on this one. I'll take Carolina.
New quarterback, Max Johnson's out for the year, right?
I know, but
Connor
Hampton is going to run roughshod over this team.
We'll find out.
Yeah, he's the truth. I have Carolina too. I don't know if I made that clear, but Charlotte's mass. Florida A&M traveling to Miami. Good luck.
Speaking of games that we don't have a line on, give me the Canes, which I tell you what, boys, I may have to buy in.
Wow.
I know.
That was quick.
I'm not there yet, but damn it, they looked good.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have been there. And for everyone's mental health, don't turn on this scrimmage. Please.
Yeah, no need to watch this game.
Speaking of scrimmages, Cal Poly is traveling to Stanford. Guys, Stanford actually looked pretty
Sounds
good
like an
against
ACC
TCU.
matchup.
That's what I always say. It's so ACC. They're playing it at 7 p.m. Eastern time for some reason. This game was made for 11 p.m. to fire on when you've had a losing day of gambling. This game was made for that. Show me the Stanford Cal Poly spread with Stanford
This
laying
should have
42
been
and a half.
the first ACC after dark type game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Stanford rolls here.
Yeah, regardless, give me the Cardinal.
Yeah, they're going to get on the board here. Andrew, you have any thoughts there? Anything deep you want to say about Cal Poly? Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
Smart
Andrew,
kids
I need
I
need a dissertation on Cal Poly Tech. What do you got?
The kids at Cal Poly would be the ones to give the dissertation, not me.
Good response.
Cal Poly, it's basically just a Stanford feeder school. UVA, Wake Forest, 7 p.m., ESPN2. This is an interesting one. Both teams look very good against overmatched opponents in the opener. Speaking of games, I have no idea who to pick. I think I'm actually going with UVA here. I like Calandria, what he brings to the offense. Grayson, comment from Grayson on the Cal Poly and Stanford thing. He goes, everyone in California went there. They're being Cal Poly, I would assume. Virginia, I like Virginia here to win the game. Anthony Calandria, I think, provides you a little bit more pop in the passing game. Wake has been, speaking of quarterback situations, they're kind of trying to figure out as well. Between Hank Bachmeier, who's on his 7th year of college football, and Michael Kern. Bachmeier got more of the share in the opener. I expect him to start this game. But give me UVA on the road.
If we had the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse soundbite, I would ask you to play it. Whenever you have a matchup like this where you're really kind of stuck, pick the better coach. Give me the Demon Deacons.
I like that reasoning. Andrew.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a good point, and make me question my own pick, which will be UVA. Look at Wake, and it seems like a program that's almost been left in the dust in the new age of college football. A sign, coach, and develop until you're a redshirt junior kind of program.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately not really how things work anymore, especially if you don't have a ton of money in your back pocket. But when you look at Wake, and maybe I'll be wrong, but their rise to above mediocrity is pretty in sync with a 5-year period of having 4 years of Sam Hartman with the year of Jamie Newman, who played quite well, sandwiched in between. So I like Calandria as the better quarterback. And for that reason, I'll take UVA.
Fair enough. 2 votes for UVA, 1 for the better coach and Dave Clawson, and I cannot argue with the reasoning, Ricky. Can't argue with it. 7:30 ABC, one of the games of the weekend in college football. Number 14 Tennessee squaring off against number 24 NC State in the Dukes Mayo Classic in Charlotte. Neutral site game. Tennessee an 8-point favorite. Lay 'em. One of my favorite bets of the entire weekend. Lay 'em with Tennessee. Nico Iamaleava, I think I got his last name right. He can frickin' sling it. NC State was giving up almost 6.5 yards per rush in the opener against Western Carolina. Don't love that. Don't love that. And Tennessee's got a competent running game as well. I get Tennessee played Chattanooga, and there's only so much that you can glean from that. But Sampson, the Tennessee running back, he had 12 carries for 124 and 3 touchdowns in the opener. So if you're giving up 6.5 yards per carry against Western Carolina, good luck with that. So yeah, give me the Vols here. This is going to be the toughest offense NC State sees all year.
Concepcion is not enough for NC
No.
State to keep up here.
No.
As much as I can't stand Tennessee, the Vols are gonna be able to cover the spread. I think they have a chance to cover the spread by a lot. This one may get out of hand.
Yeah, we talk about Virginia Tech and their strength being continuity. I think that with the hype surrounding NC State, with Western Carolina game as an indicator, might be that you can't just kind of slap together a bunch of random talent in this day and age, whether it be like, a high 4-star from Ohio State and, a quarterback who's done it at the Sun Belt level, Duke's running back, and, the number 2 guy at Wake. Put them together for a few weeks in the spring and a few weeks in the fall and expect them to be a well-oiled machine. I think that's what we saw against Western Carolina. So give me Tennessee. And I think NC State, who remains ranked despite their week 1 woes, will be an interesting team to watch because they do have the talent, but it's like, can you get there given the extremely thin margin for error that you're going to face if the goal is an ACC championship?
That's what we bring you here for, Andrew. That's good analysis. Speaking of analysis, this is how we pronounce Nico's name, Iamaleava, according to Andrew. Not Andrew Alex, Andrew commenter, Andrew. So thank you.
Purposely pronounce that wrong.
His guess is as good as mine on the pronunciation, so it's definitely better than whatever I said a couple minutes ago. App State, Clemson. Clemson's still ranked, so God bless them. 8 p.m. ACC Network. Clemson 16.5-point favorite. Guys, I don't know, man. I don't know. Clemson is going to be a team to be reckoned with in the trenches here, but 16.5 seems like a lot of points when Cade Klubnik is your starting quarterback. Man, I don't know. And App State's offense, Joey Aguilar threw for 326 and 2 touchdowns in the opener. He's a pretty solid quarterback at the G5 level. I think App State might have enough to keep this interesting. I think they just might have enough, and I just have not seen enough out of Cade Klubnik to think they can cover anything like north of 2 scores. So give me Clemson, but like by a touchdown.
Yeah, after they got big broed last week by Georgia, I think this is a really important game for the Tigers when it comes to their locker room and keeping guys focused for the remainder of the year, or whether or not they're just going to check out. Clemson wins. App State's going to keep it close enough to cover. So give me App State.
Yeah, I'll take Clemson. Again, going against the grain here, but it's a very watchable game, the kind of game that gets thrown in that 8 p.m. slot on the ACC network. So we should all be lucky that the channel exists.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it's here for. Virginia Tech, Marshall. For the love of everything, 4:30 Eastern time on Saturday inside Lane Stadium.
On the CW.
Will be broadcast on the CW. And I have a listener of my ACC podcast who, and Joey calls them our favorite Japanese baseball team, the CW Underdogs, because there is a stat, and I don't know what the updated statistic is, so I don't want to mention it on this podcast, but as far as the spread goes, the CW Underdogs, anytime there's an underdog that's playing on the CW against an ACC school, let's just say they're profitable against the spread. And I don't know what the updated number is, but that's like a weird trend that somebody on our ACC pod's been tracking. So I don't know what the update is after last week, but yeah, something to consider if you're gambling on this game. You need something obscure to point to. Just it's the game's on the CW, and there's a 3-score underdog that could cover. I think Virginia Tech gets it done. I think Virginia Tech gets it done in like blowout fashion. I think Virginia Tech covers. This is going to be a better performance. I think they come out fast here. I think the offense kind of goes for the jugular on the opening drive. I think they're going to try to push the ball down the field here because I don't think Marshall can contend in their secondary. Defensively, I think Virginia Tech will put up a better performance. I like the Hokies big here. Give me something like 42-17 or something like that. I think Tech wins here very comfortably.
I think I am in the you got to prove it to me category after last week. Marshall's going to cover the spread. I don't think they're going to win. I don't think that they're going to have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. But I do think 20.5 is too many. I sent a formerly known as a tweet when the initial line came out on this game at 13.5, and I thought that Tech would cover, but not in a fashion that would make anybody happy. And I'm still kind of feeling in that way, whereas if the spread was still there, Tech would cover that, but not enough to the point where people are going to be pleased. I don't think Tech covers in this one. I guess it would be something like 34-17 or something along those lines, where Tech will win comfortably, but will not be able to cover the spread.
Yeah, I'm with Ricky. Margin remains the same. I would have bet on it at 13.5 or whatever, but currently I got 38-21. Marshall hangs in there, maybe scores a little bit late. I think Tech, if they get out to it early like they should, especially given the lack of a sense of urgency that bit them in the ass last time around, you'd hope that they come out not trying to ease into the game this time around against lesser competition, but you never know. Either way, at home, probably a bigger overall talent gap. I like their chances. Just 21 points is a lot.
Fair. Bounce back, though. That's all that matters. Bounce back.
If they go out there and win this game by more than 3 scores, I think it's going to give people a lot less reason to be scared out of their minds going into next week.
It'll be a shot in the arm.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what this fan base needs right now. And yeah. I'm not in the locker room, but I don't think it could hurt the team to have a little bit of confidence after a big disappointment.
Yeah.
I agree. Just reading a comment that you sent me in the private chat, Andrew. We're going to wrap here. We all like Virginia Tech. We all like Virginia Tech big on Saturday. Bounce back, get the win inside Lane Stadium. We'll be back to recap it on Sunday night. Guys, anything else?
If we're wrong again, you're not going to want to miss Sunday night.
Oh, God. Yeah.
God forbid.
Andrew and I will both be in Blacksburg for this one. I'll be in the press box. Andrew will be in the stands. Mike will be at home being a dad. Shout out to Counts Family Pharmacy, Vivid Seats, and Home Field Apparel for supporting the podcast. For those who are watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. And as Andrew suggested last week, hit the notification bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're following on X, you can put tweet notifications on there. And that way, when we go live, you don't miss any episodes of The Hangover. So appreciate everyone. The video stuff's been going really well here early on in the year. We're having a lot of fun with it, and we'll see you guys on Sunday night.
Go Hokies.